Hey, happy Wednesday. Hope everybody's doing okay. Today, everybody's doing from home. So, we're just going to kind of do a really quick review about what we went over yesterday. And you've got a couple of worksheets again to work on today for more practice. And then, if you guys have questions, you guys can hop on and ask them. I'll try and have a time set up, maybe on your Chromebooks, a set time every day that you guys can get on and ask questions if you need to. I'm fine if parents are helping, if older siblings are helping. I'm fine if you're Googling help on YouTube. I'm even happy with classmates helping each other. The only time that I ask you not to is if it's a test or if you fully don't understand. Don't get just the answers from each other, because if you don't understand it, by copying the right answer is not going to help you learn it any better. So ask. I don't care. I will get on here and I will try and help you in any way that I can so that we can learn these items. Okay. All right. So just a quick review. First of all, I want to say that if you have a power of 10, if the exponent is positive, then your number is going to be greater than 1. So it doesn't have to be a very large number. It can be a very large number, but it can be any number greater than 1. If you have a power of 10 that is a negative exponent, then your number is going to be between 0 and 1. Remember, it's still positive. It does not make it negative, but it does fall between 0 and 1. Okay, so now let's just practice a few examples of some basic exponents. So if I gave you 4 to the 5th and asked you to come up with an answer, you could do a couple of different ways. One, you could expand it. You're going to expand the base number 5 times. So 4 was my base number, and I'm going to write it 5 times, and it is the product, which means you're multiplying. Now I can multiply. So again, you could just multiply, okay, using your head, mathematical skills. You can use your calculator and just plug in 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. You could use your XY key. So you would plug in 4, XY, 5. You could use your caret key, which is 4 with that up arrow key, and 5. Both of those would give you your answer as well. Okay, so let's look at Desmos. I'm going to pull up my Desmos really quickly. Remember, on Desmos, I'm going to go under Math Tools, go to 4-function calculator. There was a video on this, so if you had trouble, go back and maybe watch that video or ask me when we're together. Okay, I want to move my little circle up. And now from here, again, I could go 4 times, okay, I can do that. I really don't like that they use X for my times, but on this 4-function calculator, you are not going to see a variable of X. So that's why on this 4-function calculator, they're doing it, okay? That would be how you have to do that here, okay, by using your 4 to the 5th power, okay? Any questions on that one? So I'm going to go back over. So my answer here was 1024. Remember, this is expanded form. This is when I ask you to evaluate or solve. Okay, let's quickly do another one. If we have 3 to the 4th, that means expanded form. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, because I'm going to do that 4 times because of the exponent. Again, I could use 3. Depending on the calculator you're using, you could use 3xy to the 4th. You could use 3 caret key to the 4th. Or on your calculator, if you use Desmos, you're just going to multiply 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, and you should get 81. Okay? I hope those were pretty simple for you. Let's now review some powers of 10 with positive exponents. If I ask you to expand that one, you could do that as well. That's the same thing, 10 3 times. If I ask you to multiply that or put it in standard form or decimal form, those are the same. Remember that this number 3 is going to tell me that I have 3 zeros here. So that would be 1,000. Okay. Now, what if I gave it to you the other way? Let's say I gave you 10,000 and I wanted you to write that using a positive exponent. Well, we know it's greater than 1. So we know my exponent over here is going to be positive. Now, how many zeros I have tells me what my exponent is. So my answer without the 4 circled would be 10 to the 4th power. Okay, so if you're given the big number and asked to be written in exponent form, you're just going to go backwards from what we did yesterday. Because it's greater than 1, we know my exponent is positive, and I'm just going to count my zeros, which tells me my exponent number. Okay, even if you have it written as this, 10 times 10, you can write that as an exponent. Remember, your base number is the number that's being repeated, and your exponent is how many times, and there was 2 of those. So I would just say 10 to the positive 2. Okay? Now, let's look at some with the negatives. Let's say I have 10 to the negative 2. Remember, there's all kinds of ways I can write this. I can write it as a fraction. I can write it as a reciprocal using a positive exponent. I can write it in exponent form, okay? Or I can write it as a decimal. So first, I'm going to write it as a reciprocal using a positive exponent. So I'm going to flip it and make that positive. If I now write it as expanded form, I'm just going to do that twice because of my exponent 2. Now, if I want to write it as a fraction, I'm just going to multiply those numbers. And because I have 2 tens, that means I'm going to have 2 zeros. So that's going to be 1 over 100. Now, if I write it as a decimal, your negative says decimal, 2 spots because of the exponent. Last one has to be a 1, always a 1, never any other number, always a 1. And your first number here is going to be a 0. And remember, you have 1 less 0 than your exponent. I still like for you to put that 0 here. Okay? But one of them's in front of the decimal, one is after the decimal. Okay? Here's a tricky one. Let's say we have 10 to the negative 1. Well, if I write that using a reciprocal, I might go 1 over 10 to the 1. If I use expanded form, there's only one of them, so it's 1 over 10. Well, I can't multiply anything, so my fraction is still 1 over 10. If I put this in decimal form, I'm going to have a decimal and 1 spot. Well, my 1 spot has to be a 1, and I have no zeros there. So therefore, my answer would be 0.1. Okay? Now, what if I gave it to you backwards and asked you to write it differently? So let's say I have 0.001, and I ask you to write that as a power of 10 using a negative exponent. Well, because it's smaller than 1, I'm going to count how many spots I have, and there was 3 of them, so that's going to be 10 to the negative 3. And another way is I only have 2 zeros. And remember, this number was going to be 1 smaller with my zeros. So therefore, I would just add 1 back. So that would be 10 to the negative 3. What if I ask you to go from here and write that as an expanded form of fractions? Then that means you have 3 1 over 10s. Or if I ask you for a fraction, that would be 1 over 1,000. All right. What if I gave you 1 over 10 twice and asked you to write that using an exponent? Well, I have 2 of those. So I have 1 over 10 squared. If I flip it, I bring back in my negative. So if I was to flip that fraction and make the 2 on top, then that would look like 10 to the negative 2. Okay? So in this homework tonight, you're going to kind of juggle back and forth across both ways. You might be given the fraction and ask you to write the negative exponent. You might be given a decimal. You may be given the next negative exponent and you have to write the fraction or decimal. So this one's going to kind of convert back and forth between all of them. Again, I'll be on at a set time. You guys can come on and ask questions, or you can email me if you have any questions about any of this.